There's a good chance you're going to need help picking your quarterback and tight end for week 12 with so many teams on bye. Let's help you out. We're going to go through every game and talk about all the QBs and TEs that matter. This week, the Bills, Bengals, Falcons, Jaguars, Saints, and Jets are all off. At quarterback, the must-start list, well, you got Jalen Hurts and Lamar Jackson. At tight end, you can definitely trust Brock Bowers, Travis Kelce, Trey McBride, Cade Otton, and George Kittle if he plays. Before we talk start-sit, let's talk NFL pick'ems. You want to make sure you lock in your picks on Underdog, and if for some reason you haven't signed up for Underdog yet, well, you get a free pick in week 12. It's Jameis Winston on Thursday night, just getting a yard. That's right. Take the higher on 0.5 total yards. That's your free pick'em as a new customer. Just sign up using code ENDGAME, because when you do that as a new customer on Underdog, you get the free pick. Plus, you get up to $1,000 of bonus cash. That Thursday night matchup with the Steelers at the Browns. Let's actually start with Russell Wilson, who I can't say he cooked against the Ravens. It was too obvious, right? It was just too obvious that he had to go off against the Ravens, and of course he didn't. So, does he bounce back at least against the Browns?
He should be better because it's hard to be worse than he was last week, but how good is he really going to be against the Browns? I can only put him in the 2 QB Superflex tier this week, mainly out of spite, but also probably that's where he belongs.
Actually, this matchup isn't that much worse because the Browns, ever since Winston took over at quarterback, have been playing at a fast pace, predictably passing the ball a lot. The Browns secondary has suddenly become very vulnerable. I do think Russ, despite last week's disappointment, is still in the streaming conversation. Especially you got no Josh Allen, no Joe Burrow, no Kirk Cousins. You might need him. Pat Freiermuth, yeah, he also disappointed. What do you make of him this week?
Again, out of spite, I almost want to just bench him, but he could always score. He's somewhat involved. He's a low-end streaming option.
Now, I don't like him nearly as much in this game, so he's possibly a streaming option, but I'm just going to say he's more of a flex desperation. Now, what about Jameis Winston? I mean, he continues to air it out. Now he gets the Steelers.
Tough matchup here, but the volume is there. Again, though, I can't put him any higher than 2 QB Superflex in this matchup.
Very nervous about Winston. He had a really good matchup with the Saints, and the last time he had a tough matchup, he looked horrible. I feel like this might be a very down game for him, but you could still roll him out in Superflex. And then the tight end, David Njoku, where does he fall for you?
I think David Njoku still has to be a strong start. He gets so many targets. He has touchdown upside. He's a strong start.
I'm going to put him down probably in the streaming options tier because, again, I'm worried for Winston in this matchup. Now we got 3 wide receivers who are all getting regular targets. Man, there will be better weeks for Njoku, but I'm very nervous this week. All right, on Sunday, the Chiefs are going to take on the Panthers. So Pat Mahomes, both good and bad last week. He did throw some touchdowns, but also some interceptions, and still has not stood out for fantasy. Is this Carolina matchup the remedy?
It could be, but I still don't love Patrick Mahomes. I just don't feel like the upside is there this year. But I think in this matchup, I've got to say he's at least a solid start.
Yeah, I'll put him in the solid tier here because it's Carolina. Again, he probably won't have to throw the ball that much, but on the other hand, you know, at least he will be able to throw the ball effectively. And then there's Bryce Young. I mean, we already know what's going on here in Carolina. Nothing good, and now it's the Chiefs. But, I mean, Superflex maybe?
I will say this week, because we have a lot of quarterbacks out, right? Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, even like guys like Aaron Rodgers, Derek Carr, Kirk Cousins, guys you might play in 2 QB Superflex. I'm not going to say no to a lot of quarterbacks this week, but Bryce Young is going to be one of the quarterbacks I'm still going to say no to.
Yeah, I can't think too many quarterbacks I put below him, but I still think there are a couple. Maybe I'm just being optimistic here. I'll say the very bottom of the 2 QB Superflex tier. Now, the tight end rookie, JT Sanders, I will point this out. We know that the Chiefs give up the most points to tight ends. Is that enough to interest you?
Not really. I mean, he could score like touchdown or bust here. I feel like you shouldn't need to go this deep.
I'll put him in the streaming options, tier because you could do worse. Vikings at the Bears. Sam Darnold sort of redeemed himself last week, I will say that. But now on the road against Chicago, that's not a very good matchup.
No, not a good matchup. I'm always nervous about Sam Darnold. Again, I'm only going to say 2 QB Superflex this week.
I don't want him as one of my preferred streaming options, so Superflex only. Then TJ Hawkinson, just when everybody was ready to be all the way back in on him, he took a step back. So where do you put him in week 12?
Yeah, I was probably a little too high on TJ Hawkinson last week, but I still can't drop him too far. I'm going to say solid start this week.
Agree. I mean, he's still going to be one of the more high-end tight end options that there are. He's still solid because he's getting targets. Just because it didn't happen last week doesn't mean it can't happen this week. As far as Caleb Williams goes, I mean, we definitely saw improvements, but I really want to see more in terms of fantasy points. What do you think he can do against this Vikings defense?
I agree. I liked a lot of what I saw last week, but the production for fantasy still wasn't there. The Vikings do give up a lot to, receivers and things, but they're also a tough defense. So 2 QB Superflex only. 2
QB Superflex is as high as I'll go. Other thing with the Bears, they did run the ball a lot more last week, which is good for them, but not so good for Caleb's fantasy production. And Cole Kmet has kind of been a forgotten man. Will he do anything to make us remember him in this matchup?
Probably not. I'm not starting Cole Kmet.
And neither am I. Not feeling really great about the Bears offense in general this week. Now, hopefully this video helps you with all your start-sit decisions, but if you still have questions for start-sit, waiver wire trades, or anything fantasy football related, use the Draft Lane app because that connects you directly with Chris and myself for all your fantasy football needs. Download it for free right now. Next, we got the Titans at the Texans. Will Levis, still the guy for Tennessee. Hey, he's making some strides. Is it enough for fantasy purposes?
Again, this week with so many quarterbacks on bye, I think he's at least worth a start in a 2 QB Superflex league, but I still don't want to roll out Will Levis in my 1 QB leagues.
Totally agree with that. Superflex only. Then CJ Stroud, I mean, when is it going to happen? Is it going to happen for him this year? Even with Nico Collins back, we're just not seeing the same guy as last year.
We're not, and the run game is so good with Joe Mixon that they really don't need to throw the ball as much. So, and this is not a good matchup against the Titans secondary. CJ Stroud, I think, sadly, is going to have to also be in the 2 QB Superflex only bucket.
Not a good matchup against the Titans. Defense has been really good against the pass. Agreed, this Texans team has gotten better in real life, and that means worse production for Stroud in fantasy. And Dalton Schultz at tight end, I mean, I don't even know the last time I seriously considered him as a streaming option. I'm just going to say I'm avoiding him.
Yeah, same. I just don't even really think about Dalton Schultz as a streaming option. I'm avoiding as well.
Lions at the Colts. Jared Goff, could say he bounced back pretty well last week. Now he's on the road against the Colts. Is he going to just keep on rolling?
He's going to keep on rolling, but not to the degree of last week. Last week I said strong start at home against the Jags. This is on the road, but it's still the Colts, so I'm going to say solid start this week.
Colts defense isn't scary. This Lions offense is kind of scary to the opponent. A solid start. I mean, Goff, at this point, he's had, one bad game? He's been solid pretty much all year. Sam Laporta did not get in on the fun last week because he missed the game with injury. If he comes back, are you putting him in your lineup?
I think so. It's the Colts. Doesn't scare me off him. Solid start this week if he plays.
As far as the tight ends go, he's still got more upside than most, so solid start. If Laporta is out again, we pivot to Brock Wright, who did get in on the fun with a touchdown last week.
That was all he did, though. I think he had one catch. It just happened to be a touchdown, which is not a bad thing. But, I mean, this is touchdown or bust. This is getting too deep for me. I'm going to avoid.
Yeah, this would be only if there's nobody on the waiver wire for tight end. I can't even say desperation stream. Let's just say avoid. Now, Anthony Richardson, we've been saying, yes, you can believe in last week's production. He is back. But do you like him this week against the Lions?
I do. It's a good matchup for him here. He's very risky. I would prefer him in a 2 QB Superflex, but I think if you're desperate, which you might be this week with the quarterbacks on bye, you could stream him.
Agree. Just because the Lions are going to be a heavy favorite in this game, there could still be fantasy points on the board for Richardson. He's always got that rushing upside. This is why you can't count out a guy like him. So let's say he's, I think, a solid streaming option. Patriots and Dolphins. Drake May continues to impress, although it's not like he's overwhelming you with fantasy points. What does he do in Miami?
Exactly. Now he's on the road against this Dolphins secondary. He does run a little bit, and he has, like you said, he's looked pretty good, but I can't put him any more than 2 QB Superflex this week.
I think only just because we have so many teams that are off this week. I think he's a streaming option because of his legs. He might be able to expose some holes in this Dolphins front. just by running the ball. He might have to. So I think he's a streamer. Tight end, Hunter Henry. He's just always in that streaming tier. Never much higher, never much lower. You agree?
I agree, but he's always a good streamer. I mean, not always. He has his bad games, of course. But, I mean, he's always a streamer you feel, warm and fuzzy about at least. So, yeah, he's streamable.
You feel good about Tua Tagovailoa going against the Patriots now in this home game.
He wasn't bad last week. He hadn't been great prior, at least for fantasy. I'm talking about for fantasy here. Don't get on me, Dolphins fans, and say, look at his EPA or whatever. For fantasy, he hasn't been great. But he bounced back last week. They are at home. Tyreek Hill looked a little bit better. Jonnu Smith there. Devon Achane. I think he's borderline streamable this week.
Oh, man. Borderline. I'll say he's a very strong streaming option this week. I mean, again, in a 1 QB league, you might be looking for somebody with those buys. I'm not worried about this Patriots defense. Tua has been really good since coming back. I feel pretty confident he can put up some points here. So I think he's a strong streamer. And then Jonnu Smith, I mean, I know a lot of people say must add, you got to pick him up. I wouldn't go that far, but he's got to at least be a very good streamer too.
I'm actually going to have him ahead of the stream. I'm going to say a solid start. He's the tight end 5 over the last 3 weeks. Now, granted, that's a big part of it because of the huge game he just had, but he's also 8th among all tight ends in targets over the last 3 weeks. I think he's a solid start.
Buccaneers taking on the Giants in Week 12. That means we get Baker Mayfield going against Tommy DeVito. That's right. Well, let's get back to Baker. He might have his main target, Mike Evans, back, so where does he fall?
If he gets Evans back, which I think he will, I think he's a streaming option this week. I'm not going to put him higher than that, but I think a streamer.
Wow. Well, look, if he gets Evans back, I think he's a strong start. I mean, he had been one of the top fantasy quarterbacks, and then he lost both his top receivers. He still managed to scramble, and cobble together some decent games and tough matchups. This Giants team is, they're packing it in. I think he's going to be a very strong start with Evans. And I doubt we can be too much higher on Tommy DeVito, although he does get to face this very soft Bucs secondary.
Yeah, I said this week with all the bye weeks, and because it's the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, I'm going to put him in the 2 QB Superflex bucket, but he's literally the bottom of the 2 QB Superflex bucket. Start only if you have to.
Yeah, I don't care what the matchup is. It's Tommy DeVito. It's the Giants. Yeah, Superflex if you are very desperate. Cowboys and the Commanders, still Cooper Rush, but now it's a road game against Washington.
All right, I said Bryce Young, one of the few quarterbacks I'm not starting, even in Superflex this week with all the buys. Cooper Rush, one of the other quarterbacks I'm not starting.
Agree. I mean, he hasn't been horrible, but yeah, there's almost no upside here. Just avoid. And at the tight end position, you thought Jake Ferguson was going to be solid all year until the worst happened. Not only Dak Prescott out for the season, but now Ferguson banged up and left on Monday Night Football. May not play. If he does, do you even trust him?
Barely a streaming option. We did see Cooper Rush, targeted Schoonmaker a decent amount after Ferguson left. So he does target the tight end, but, barely a streamer.
Barely streamable. I mean, that's only if he's fully cleared before the weekend. If Ferguson is ruled out, which is very possible, then it could be Luke Schoonmaker. You already mentioned he got some targets. Is that enough?
Barely streamable because Cooper Rush will target the tight end, and they don't really have any other tight ends they throw to.
This is true, and there's really not many other receivers taking targets away here. I think this is almost like a one-to-one replacement. Schoonmaker is kind of equivalent to Jake Ferguson, which again makes him barely streamable. Now, Jaden Daniels can't be a no-doubt must-start because he hasn't put up those huge fantasy games lately, but now he gets the Cowboys. I mean, I think he's pretty much as strong of a start as you can get.
I've got him in a solid start. Maybe I'm a little too low on him this week. I am a little nervous, but you're right. It's at home. It's the Cowboys. Not a lot of quarterbacks I'm starting over him.
Yeah, well, it's funny because I was down on him the last couple of weeks. I might be higher than you this week, though, just because if there's a chance for him to go off, I think it could be here. I really hope that this extra couple of days off really does him well with the ribs and they just actually let him loose again. So I'll trust the town and say strong start this week. Then we got Zach Ertz, the tight end. I mean, he's been actually sneakily good in fantasy.
He has, and I'm finally moving him up to the solid start tier. He's been solid almost every game this year, and it's at home. It's the Cowboys. I think Zach Ertz a solid start.
Well, look, I feel pretty good about JD here. I'm going to say Ertz should be a strong start because This Cowboys defense is not nearly what it was last year. Ertz continues to be more involved as they still don't have a clear number 2 receiver in that offense, and so he's been that safety valve for Daniels. I like Ertz a lot this week. Next up is the Broncos at the Raiders. All right, let's talk Bo Nix. Everyone's all over Bo Nix. Hey, maybe Rookie of the Year, we'll see. But for fantasy purposes, how high are you?
I am moving Bo Nix up to the solid start. I have to come around on Bo Nix, and it's the Raiders. That doesn't scare me. He runs. He's been very good the last 3-4 weeks. I think Bo Nix this week is a solid start.
He's got to be. Again, I can never get too carried away by this Denver offense, but yeah, it's the Raiders. Bo Nix has been good consistently, and at the very least, I know this. He's a solid start this week, and you got to take this line. It's surprising to see that he's only at 217.5 yards on underdog pick'ems. I'm taking the higher there. I think you can easily get that. And if you're new to underdog, you can take that pick, combine it with the free pick I already mentioned earlier, and you can win your very first time doing NFL pick'ems. Make sure if you're signing up for the first time on underdog, you use that promo code I mentioned, ENDGAME, when you check out, because it gets you the free pick plus that bonus cash up to $1,000 when you first sign up. And for the Raiders, as far as we know, it's still Gardner Minshew for some reason.
It is. And I said there were only a few quarterbacks I'm not starting this week, even in Superflex with all the buys. Here's your third and final one I am not starting this week. Against the Broncos, no thank you.
Every quarterback that is going to be starting this week in the NFL, I'm going to put Gardner Minshew dead last. 49ers at Packers. Here's a couple of good quarterbacks you can consider. Let's start with Brock Purdy. What do you make of him?
Yeah, he's been really good the 2 games with CMC back. It sounds like we're going to get Kittle back this week. Packers, 49ers, rivalry, always good games. I think Brock Purdy this week, a solid start.
Definitely a solid start. What you got to like if you got Purdy on your fantasy team is he's running the ball quite a bit. Of course, scored a touchdown, but also using his legs to extend plays. So, yeah, should be solid here. And then there's Jordan Love. Was okay in a pretty tough matchup last week. Does he get better this week?
I think so. Jordan Love, I can never really drop him more than a solid start. Even in this matchup against the 49ers, still a solid start.
Yeah, I feel that's about right. Solid. Don't love him in week 12. I mean, San Francisco is at least still a decent defense. He'll be fine. One quarterback league. If you got Love, don't overthink it. Just roll him out. Tucker Kraft, on the other hand, I don't know. I had my doubts. Tough schedule. It's not better this week. He did nothing for you last week. Are you still starting him?
No chance I'm putting Tucker Kraft in my lineup against the 49ers. No way.
I think we can just sit him. And like I said this a couple of weeks ago, he was on my cut list, and now you see why. Cardinals at the Seahawks. All right, after the bye, Kyler Murray back in Seattle. What do you think he does?
I think he'll be great. The 3 games prior to the bye, he was really good. The 3 games since Call of Duty has come out, he's actually been really good this year. Maybe he's not playing as much Call of Duty, but I think Kyler Murray, especially this week, is a strong start.
Yeah, and he'll be a strong start probably down the stretch here. The schedule gets really nice for the Cardinals in terms of quarterback and receiver play. Seattle defense isn't scaring anybody. Strong start. Then Geno Smith. I mean, he really showed something last week in that comeback win against the Niners. It's a home game now against the Cardinals. Where does he rank?
I'm going to put him in the streaming options this week. He didn't have a huge game. He did run in that touchdown at the end to win the game, which helped his fantasy value, but he didn't have a huge game outside of that, so streaming tier for me this week.
Yeah, I'm encouraged. This is looking more like the Seahawks offense was expecting early on. You know, it takes time with new coaching staff and all that. But still, I'm not going to put him more than just a streaming option either. He's got upside, but I don't think it's massive this week. Sunday Night Football going to be the Eagles at the Rams. All right, so Jalen Hurts, still a no-doubter here. Now what about Dallas Goedert at tight end?
I feel good about Dallas Goedert. I never feel like he's a solid or strong start, but I always feel like he's one of the better streaming options.
Yeah, that feels about right. I mean, the receivers are healthy. He's never going to be someone who blows up necessarily, but if you need a streamer, he'll get you something. Now for the Rams, you got Matt Stafford coming off a 4-touchdown game. How good do you feel about him here?
Can't feel very good against this Eagles defense. Man, this defense has gotten good. Quinyon Mitchell playing great right now. But at the same time, I'm not going to say bench Stafford, of course, so 2 QBs Superflex only this week.
Definitely playable in a super flex league pretty much on a weekly basis. But again, don't get carried away by last week's stats. This Eagles defense is for real. It's not a great spot for Stafford, even though you still want to start Kupp and Nakua if you have them. Then Monday night, we get the Ravens at the Chargers. All right, so even though Lamar's coming off a disappointing game, you're still starting Lamar Jackson. Let's be clear there. But are you starting Mark Andrews?
Not feeling good about Mark Andrews. Isaiah Likely came back last week, and then Isaiah Likely looked like the tight end one. But I will say Mark Andrews the Steelers always have his number. He was good before that. I'm going to only say streaming option, but probably your best streaming option this week.
Completely agree. Just a streamer with Likely back. That does affect him. This is not a great spot against that Chargers defense on the road, so he's a decent streamer. Do you think Isaiah Likely is more involved with Andrews, maybe more upside?
Maybe. I'm going to say Likely also a streaming option. I don't like him as much as Andrews, but I think you could stream him if you need to.
Isaiah Likely is an unpredictable streamer, so if you need somebody and there isn't anybody better out there that we've already mentioned, sure, you can stream him. Now, the matchup last week for Justin Herbert was good. This one is even better, but we saw what happened with Russell Wilson against the Ravens team. Where do you put Herbert?
Yeah, I'm not worried about what happened with Russell Wilson last week. This is Justin Herbert and the Chargers. He's running the football. He's been playing great. He's probably the strongest of the strong starts this week.
Absolutely. He's got to be. Again, maybe he doesn't go insane, ballistic, 400 yards, whatever. Let's be realistic here. He's still one of the better starts that you're going to have at the quarterback position. And it's only fitting we end with Will Dissly. That's right, Will Dissly has come on. This matchup, again, looks too good to be true, is it?
It does. Now, Pat Freiermuth did nothing against this defense last week, but I feel better about Will Dissly than Pat Freiermuth. I'm going to say also a strong start.
And that's where he belongs for this week for sure. Look, seriously, we got to buy into this connection. Dissly and Herbert, it's becoming a thing. You need a tight end, get Will Dissly. You need help at any other position, you know we have start sit for everything. It's all in this week's playlist for week 12.